Have you ever stopped to think about how a nation's foundations can, well, crumble and then have to be rebuilt, sometimes more than once?
It's a really powerful idea, isn't it?
Yeah, that America's constitutional story isn't just one straight line.
Yeah.
It's got these moments of huge breaks and then recreation.
Definitely. And it makes you wonder why certain historical moments feel so present, even now, centuries later, like they're still unfolding somehow.
Exactly. It shows that, national identity, the principles we build on, they're not set in stone.
Right. They get forged and reforged through enormous challenges and often through really intense conflict.
And that's precisely what we're getting into today. Our mission here is to unpack the crucial insights from Eric Foner's book, The Second Founding. Foner argues quite powerfully that the era right after the Civil War basically reshaped American democracy from the ground up. We want to give you a really thorough critique, get into the meat of his arguments, but importantly, no spoilers.
And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book critique.
Now, for anyone not familiar, Eric Foner, well, he's a giant in the field, a really distinguished historian.
DeWitt Clinton, professor emeritus at Columbia, his expertise on the Civil War and Reconstruction, it's pretty much unparalleled. He's the authority for many on this era.
And his book, The Second Founding, came out in 2019. It's nonfiction history, obviously.
Right, specifically diving into American constitutional and legal history, but, the ripples go way further. It really impacts how we think about political science, civil rights discussions today.
It gives a contemporary lens on these, foundational historical moments.
Absolutely.
And the historical backdrop Foner paints is just essential to grasp. We're talking right after the Civil War.
A time of just unprecedented national crisis, but also, incredible possibility.
The country had just abolished slavery through this incredibly bloody war. And now it faced this huge task, redefining citizenship rights. And maybe the biggest piece, what's the federal government's role in protecting all that?
The whole identity of the nation was up for grabs.
Totally.
And you had the Confederacy collapsed, obviously, but also these incredibly powerful mass movements pushing for racial justice.
These weren't just abstract debates in Congress.
No. Millions of people were demanding change. And you had these fierce political fights over the very direction of American democracy. It was a real crucible moment. It shaped so much of what came next.
Okay, so let's unpack Foner's core idea. His central argument is that adopting the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments wasn't just an update, it was a second founding.
A second founding. That's a huge claim. He's putting it on par with, the original Constitution itself.
Pretty much. He's saying these weren't just small adjustments.
Not at all. These were fundamental transformations. Take the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery. Everywhere. Finally ending the institution that had defined and divided America for so long.
And then comes the 14th.
Right.
Which you could argue has even wider implications, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. The 14th Amendment guarantees birthright citizenship. Born here, you're a citizen. Simple as that, regardless of race. And it guarantees equal protection under the law for everyone. Due process, too. I mean, this amendment laid the groundwork for so many civil rights battles later on.
And the 15th Amendment rounds out the trio.
Right, enshrining the right to vote, specifically for Black men at that time.
So if you take these three together, Foner argues they fundamentally changed the whole relationship between the federal government and individuals.
Exactly. It shifted power, moved the balance away from just state authority towards national authority, especially on rights. They really tried to weave equality into the constitutional fabric itself.
Which the original Constitution, with its compromises over slavery, just hadn't done.
Couldn't have done, really. But here's the tragic twist Foner emphasizes. These incredibly radical provisions, they got undermined.
It wasn't just that they faded away.
No, it was an act of dismantling. Political backlash, key Supreme Court rulings, the rise of Jim Crow laws at the state level. Foner argues the whole Reconstruction era wasn't just some political phase. It was a radical constitutional revolution.
Yeah.
And its promise and its failures are still shaping things today. It's an unfinished project. That's crystal clear in his analysis.
Let's dig into Foner's key claims then, and the evidence he uses. Claim number 1. The Reconstruction Amendments completely transformed the Constitution.
Yeah, he argues it shifted from a document that basically protected a racial hierarchy, think the 3/5 clause,
Right.
into one that at the very least promised universal rights and equality. even if the reality didn't always match the promise.
And how does he back that up?
Oh, meticulously. It's really compelling. He doesn't just assert it. He tracks the debates in Congress, the ratification arguments in the states.
So primary sources.
Absolutely. The congressional record, what lawmakers actually said. Newspapers from the time showing public debate. And crucially, Black political activism. He shows this wasn't just imposed from above. It had popular roots and revolutionary intent. He really brings the historical process to life.
That sounds incredibly thorough. Okay, claim number 2. These amendments started a whole new era of federal protection for individual rights.
Which was a huge shift, right, given how much emphasis there had always been on states' rights.
A massive departure.
Yeah, almost seismic. Foner looks closely at the wording, the text of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, and how they were interpreted early on. He shows how they broke from the original Constitution's deference to states.
And he points to specifics.
Oh, yeah. Like Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, it explicitly gives Congress the power to enforce the amendment's provisions with appropriate legislation.
So not just implied power.
No, it's a clear instruction. It fundamentally changed the federal-state power dynamic when it came to protecting individual rights.
Okay, and this leads us to the really tough part of the story. Foner's third claim. The promise of Reconstruction got blocked, systematically frustrated.
By the Supreme Court and by Southern states resisting.
Yeah.
Leading straight into the Jim Crow era.
This really drives home that unfinished project idea.
It does. And Foner details this judicial retreat. Landmark cases like United States v. Cruikshank in 1876.
What did that do?
The court said the 14th Amendment only protected people from state actions, not from, say, terrorist groups like the KKK. That massively limited the federal government's ability to step in.
Wow.
And then maybe the most infamous one, Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896. That's the case that upheld separate but equal, basically legalized segregation.
So the court just interpreted the amendments really narrowly.
Exactly. Gutted their enforcement power, essentially. And that allowed states to systematically strip away Black civil and political rights. Foner also details the violence, the disenfranchisement, the economic exploitation, all that followed after federal Reconstruction ended in 1877. It's a really sobering account, but essential for understanding how those promises just evaporated.
And his final major claim is about relevance today. That Reconstruction isn't just history, it's alive in today's struggles over these same amendments.
Right. He connects the dots powerfully between past and present. He points out how debates today over, say, voting rights.
Still a huge issue.
Definitely. Or mass incarceration, or even reparations. They all echo the core questions from Reconstruction, the unfinished business. He really pushes you to see this second founding not as something done and dusted, but as a living constitutional tradition we're still wrestling with, still trying to fully realize.
Okay, with those core arguments laid out, let's try to assess Foner's work critically. We can use what's sometimes called an Adlerian epistemic lens, basically looking at how he builds his case.
Distinguishing facts from interpretation and maybe speculation.
Exactly. It sounds like he's very strong on the facts of the legislative history, court cases, and clear about his interpretations, the impact on federalism, for instance.
Yeah, he really grounds his big claims in those primary sources, the legal texts. That gives it a lot of weight.
But you mentioned sometimes he blends that with his own understanding.
Well, yeah, especially when discussing, say, the intentions of lawmakers or judges back then. He brings his vast scholarly knowledge, which is incredibly well supported,
Right.
But he also synthesizes motives, consequences. And that synthesis, while deeply insightful, sometimes edges towards his informed opinion, particularly on why people acted as they did.
So the book is strongest when sticking purely to the evidence.
I'd say so. It's less speculative then. The parts exploring what-if scenarios are interesting, well-reasoned, but maybe less empirically grounded than the core historical analysis.
That makes sense. It's good to know where the historian is presenting evidence versus offering their expert judgment. Now, what about a golden rule assessment? Asking if leaders back then would have accepted the injustices Black Americans faced if the roles were reversed.
Foner's narrative really exposes a massive failure of empathy, doesn't it? Among many white elites, particularly.
Yeah, their retreat from Reconstruction.
It enabled, sometimes actively supported, this reimposition of racial hierarchy that clearly violates any sense of treating others as you'd want to be treated.
And Foner himself.
He absolutely applies golden rule reasoning. By centering the experiences and hopes of the formerly enslaved, arguing the vision failed precisely because that reciprocity was denied. The unfinished project idea hinges on that failure of empathy.
Okay, but this does raise another question, maybe just outside the book's main focus. Could Foner have applied that golden rule lens more broadly to other groups?
Like women.
Native American.
Yeah, their rights were also very much in flux and often ignored by these amendments. That's a fair point. It's a valid critique. Foner's focus is tightly on the amendments and their direct impact on Black Americans, which is obviously a huge and vital topic. But yeah, the women's suffrage movement felt betrayed by the 15th Amendment, only including men. And Native Americans were often completely outside the citizenship framework being debated. So acknowledging that might broaden the picture, though it might also dilute the book's specific constitutional focus. It shows the fight for rights was complex, multifaceted.
What I find really interesting is how Foner explicitly links these amendments back to the preamble of the original Constitution, using those goals like forming a more perfect union as a measuring stick.
He does, and it really highlights the gap between aspiration and reality. So form a more perfect union. Yes, the amendments aim for that, tried to expand citizenship, but sectional divides, white resistance. Foner shows how they just tore at that goal. Or established justice. Okay, they laid a legal foundation for equality. Non-enforcement allowed Jim Crow. Ongoing injustice. Ensure domestic tranquility. Reconstruction's collapse actually led to more violence and unrest in the South for decades, not less.
So the intent might align with the preamble, but the outcome often didn't. What about things like common defense or general welfare?
Well, common defense could be seen as broadened, right? Protecting civil rights becomes part of defending the nation against internal oppression.
Interesting take.
But again, the federal will to actually do that defending faded and promote the general welfare. The promise of equal opportunity was just gutted by economic exclusion, things like convict leasing, keeping Black Americans in near slavery conditions.
And secure the blessings of liberty, extended in theory to Black men.
But massively curtailed in practice, a reality we still grapple with. So yeah, Foner gets high marks for showing how the amendments tried to advance those preamble ideals, but he's brutally honest about the limits and the pushback.
Okay, thinking about the logical structure, Foner's argument seems really consistent, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It flows clearly. Here's how the amendments changed things, here's how that change was blocked, and here's why it still matters. Very logical progression.
He avoids obvious fallacies, like circular reasoning or straw man arguments.
Definitely. He engages directly with the historical evidence and counter-arguments fairly. One thing a really critical reader might point to, though, is maybe a touch of, let's call it post hoc reasoning.
Meaning seeing connections after the fact.
Sort of. Connecting events from number 150 years ago directly to present-day struggles. The links Foner draws are plausible, often compelling. But proving direct, unbroken causation over that time span is really complex.
So it relies partly on narrative coherence, tracing themes and influences.
Exactly. As much as direct empirical proof for every link, which isn't necessarily a flaw, just something to be aware of when reading historical analysis spanning centuries.
That's a useful distinction. And thinking about wisdom, the short-term consequences versus the long-term impacts.
Yeah, short-term, huge promise, but very patchy enforcement, ultimately reversed in the South. Big disappointment for many.
But long-term.
Profound. Even when they weren't being enforced, those amendments were still there in the Constitution. Latent power. They became the legal and moral basis for the civil rights movement later on.
Right. They were rediscovered, in a sense.
And they continue to shape debates today about equality, citizenship, federal power. Foner's account also has this strong moral dimension, right? It's about justice, hope, the reminder of unfinished work. That definitely taps into a sense of wisdom using understanding for, well, higher human ends.
And just a reminder as we go deep here, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book critique. At Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel offers AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques, all aimed at inspiring reflection and rational thought. It's really about building a deeper understanding, one book at a time.
Fostering that critical engagement. That's the goal.
So let's summarize. Strengths of the second founding. What really makes it stand out?
Well, first off, Foner's grasp of constitutional history is just top tier. Unmatched, really.
He makes complex stuff clear.
He does. He synthesizes these tangled legal, political, social threads into a narrative that's actually clear and compelling. And his focus on original intent, the text, the legislative history, it builds this incredibly persuasive case for just how revolutionary these amendments were meant to be.
He convinces you of their transformative aim.
Without a doubt.
Okay, and potential weaknesses. Or maybe areas where it leaves you wanting more.
Well, the flip side of its strength, that tight focus on constitutional law, is that sometimes the broader social, the economic picture for Black Americans or women or other groups during Reconstruction, it gets less page time.
He's covered that elsewhere, maybe, but not as much here.
Right. And that intense legal focus, while great for specialists, might make it a bit challenging for a general reader who isn't already comfortable with constitutional language and concepts. There's a bit of a learning curve, maybe.
That's fair. Accessibility is always a factor. And does Foner leave us with big unresolved questions at the end?
He leaves us with the biggest one, really. How do we renew or complete this second founding today in the 21st century?
He doesn't offer a roadmap.
No blueprint. He urges vigilance, engagement with these principles, but he doesn't prescribe specific political or constitutional actions. And that lack of a neat answer kind of forces you, the reader, to think about what comes next, what our role is. It's quite powerful, actually.
And it's worth noting, this comprehensive analysis of the Second Founding draws upon a systematic and precise framework, carefully designed to provide a thorough and insightful critique of scholarly works, ensuring a robust examination of the book's arguments and contributions. We aim to give you the clearest possible understanding.
So wrapping up, what does this all mean for you listening today? Eric Foner's The Second Founding is just, well, it's masterful. It's timely. It's ethically charged. It shows how the U.S. tried to remake itself after slavery.
And crucially, why that remaking is still both an inspiration and, frankly, an obligation for everyone. It's a story that is absolutely still unfolding around us.
Definitely a vital read if you care about American history, law, and where we are today.
It leaves you with that challenge, doesn't it? If the Second Founding was revolutionary but unfinished, what does it truly mean for us now to finally realize its promise?
That's the question to ponder.
A question we all need to engage with. For more insightful analyses like this and more thought-provoking discussions, do check out Mindful Moments on YouTube and explore our podcast library. It's all designed to inspire reflection and rational thought.
Keep exploring. Keep thinking.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.